Hi there and welcome to Darlene's Creative Studio. I wanted to do a video on some of my favorite tools, things that I reach for every single day and use them often. You don't have to go out and buy the exact same one, but these are just things that I find that are really great for someone who likes crafting or journaling or making their own journals. And I just wanted to share some of them with you. One of my number one things that I reach for quite a lot is a bone folder. I have about 4 or 5 different bone folders. I recently purchased this one from Amazon. I use it for everything, bone folding and creasing and doing all kinds of things. But this one I like because it's got the flatter end on one side, and then it's got the curved edges on the other side with a little point, and you can use for scoring if you want to, but a bone folder is one of the tools I take with me when I travel. It's in my Lazy Susan that I keep on my work surface when I'm working all the time, and I'm constantly reaching for a bone folder. So I would say a bone folder is one of my many tools that I reach for. Another one is this sharp knife. Some people use X-Acto knives. My father was a handyman, and he always had one of these type knives on his workbench. He always had one in his back pocket. Whenever he was working on something, he always pulled out his knife, and he always made sure he had a refill of these blades as well. Excuse me. So I would say, I don't know how many times in a day that I reach for this knife. It is my go-to tool, and when I'm cutting, I use it to cut my little papers and stuff along the edges. And when you're going to do that, always make sure that you put in a new blade, or else it will tear your paper. But this is one of my go-to tools. So when I was in Florida at Harbor Freight, I purchased a smaller mini version of this and the little mini blades, and that is what I take with me when I travel. But this one is always in my Lazy Susan on my work surface. I think we have one in our kitchen drawer, and we have one out on our garage, but this is one of my go-to tools as well, a sharp knife. And these blades you can take out and flip over and use the other end, and then I put them in a tin can when I recycle them, and then put them in the recycling so that no one cuts themselves, and then they do get crushed when they crush the tin can. So that is another tool that is a must for myself. And when I'm cutting, I always use a metal ruler. I try and find something with a cork back so that it doesn't slide around. But when using a knife, it's always really great to have the metal ruler so that it does not slide off. Plastic ones are great, but they do cut. When you're using your knife over and over again, you will end up slicing a little bit, and then you'll have like a little wow in the side of your ruler. So a metal ruler, sharp knife, and some sort of a cutting mat. It does not have to be large. You can get some of the smaller little tiny ones. I do have a little one that I take with me when I travel. I have this one, and I have also a huge large one that fits on my desktop, and that one hangs on the wall with 2 little 3M hooks. I've just drilled 2 little holes in it and hang it up. But a cutting mat, a metal ruler, and a knife, those 3 go together hand in hand so that you do not wreck any work surfaces. And this knife is pretty good on a cutting mat. It does not hurt it at all. So those are some of the tools that I use and grab all the time. Another is an awl or a poking tool. I've used this to pull when I'm sewing and my threads get all mangled. I even use this to kind of sort out my threads. If you get a knot in something, this is one that I grab all the time. Now I believe this is a Tim Holtz, a Sizzix, for poking out when you do die cuts, but I use this as my hole punch for when I do my journals. So when I'm making these little journals, I'll punch holes with this, but I always have this on hand as well. Always grabbing for this tool. So it does not have to be this one specifically, but a punch of some kind for punching holes in your paper or other things. A very good pair of scissors. And in order for your scissors to work well, I would suggest cleaning them often. I have a little green woolly scrubby thing that you use in your kitchen. I keep one of those in my studio, and it's buried under all of this stuff right now, but I just cut a little piece off, and I use that when I'm cutting papers and stuff, or there's some glue on there. Just take your little woolly brush, damp it a little bit, and clean off your scissors. I also suggest getting a scissor sharpener. Now you can get little handheld ones, a little tiny, it's a little tiny one. I'm trying to think if I have it here. Yes, I do. This one I think I got at a sewing center. And keep your scissors sharp. And you should probably have one that you use a lot for paper, and then maybe another set. I have about 4 sets in my Lazy Susan on my work surface. These are for paper cutting. These I cut just paper. If I'm gluing, I have a green set. They have a turquoise and green handles, and those are the ones I use when the paper has glue on it, and if I'm using glue for anything. And I use those, and then again I clean them and sharpen them whenever possible. But keep sharp scissors, and keep separate scissors, one for paper cutting, a set for fussy cutting your papers. You don't want to have glue on them, and you want them to have a nice sharp cut, and then another set for when you're cutting papers that you've glued on. But scissors, maintaining them and keeping them in good shape is another important tool. And these are things that, like I say, they're my favorite because I reach for them every single day. It's not something that I just use once in a while. It's something that I use quite a bit. The other thing I use quite a bit is my cutter. It's a self-sharpening cutter. It's a large, I'm going to see if I can bring it over just so you can see it. I'll just move all my little bits out of the way here. I keep this on a table of its own, and I use it every day. It is a Fiskars, and I put a piece of measuring tape here because in the middle where it folds, and I'll show you that. Let me just put this out of the way. In the middle where it folds, let me pull this off. This folds up so that it doesn't take up as much space, but it has this little gap here so that when it's open, you lose that 6-inch, between 5.5 and 6 inches, you lose the little marks. So I've just taken a piece of measuring tape, an old one that I had, and I put double-sided tape on it, and I just line it up with my measurements on the ruler, make sure that they're even, and I just put that there because this stays open all the time. If I'm closing it, I'll pull this piece of my tape off. And then there's a little clip on the bottom here that will hold this flap from opening when it's folded up. But this sits on my own separate workstation, and it's open all the time, and I use it over and over again. And it is a self-sharpening blade. This metal bar here, it just sharpens the rotary blade that is inside the housing. So it's, and then again, I make sure that I keep this clean. If you're cutting paper and every once in a while it gets sticky and gluey, I just make sure that I clean that surface off, the plastic, make sure the edges are clean, and then I'll take a little candle, a little tiny birthday candle or something, and I'll just rub it along the edge there, and then just rub that a couple of times just to get that, any of the little edges that are rough on the edges of my metal. But this is a self-sharpening. I have had this for over probably a year and a half, and I use it every day. It is absolutely awesome. You do not have to replace blades over and over and over again. I do have a couple of the smaller ones, and honestly, when I go to a craft session and I take one of my cutters with me, by the end of the craft session I have to put in a new blade because I've cut paper if I'm making a journal. So I just love this one. This is another thing that I do not do without. Use it on a daily basis. Now that particular one I purchased at Joann Fabrics, and I had a 50% off coupon. They are about $80, $90 to $100. So I waited till I had a 50% off coupon, and I tell you, it is absolutely worth it. So that is something, if you are a journal maker or cut a lot of paper, that is something that I suggest you get because it'll save you a lot of hassles of having to change blades. I think I'm going to stop there. I will do another session once I keep going, but I also have this paintbrush I've had for probably 10 years, and you can see it is actually hard from about there down. This is my glue brush, And I use that for putting on gel medium, for putting on Yes paste, anything like that when I'm decoupaging, Mod Podge. This is the brush I use, and I just clean it often. It's getting pretty hard. I think this is mostly paint in the bottom and some glues, but this is the one I use as a glue. I keep it totally separate. I don't use it for anything else other than glue. And then when I find it starts to get really hard, I will actually just stick it in some boiling water and let it, you know, up to there, and just let it rinse out, clean it really well, and I'll get it some more use out of it. It will soften up a little bit more, but this is what I use for my glue brush, and it sits in my Lazy Susan as well, and I use it all the time. This is specifically for my glue. So I always have a pencil handy. I always have a pencil sharpener handy. There are tons of other tools. Like I say, as I'm working on crafts, I'm kind of making note of the tools that I go for and grab often. So that's the kind of thing that I wanted to share with you. I do use the binder clips a lot. These little mini binder clips. I just bought myself a little box of them, and I use those for quite a few things. So I always have my little bowl handy. These are little bowls that I painted a couple of years ago. These are wooden salad bowls that I've painted up. But I just keep binder clips handy, and I use them for a lot of stuff. So I always have to make sure this is handy on my desk for doing any kind of project to just hold pages together. If you're, you know, stacking things and you're making 3 or 4 books at a time, this is just a great thing to have on hand to grab. You can use large paper clips, other kind of clips as well. I have these 3-inch jumbo paper clips I use for holding paper together, but any kind of paper clip is good to have on hand when you are making things. It's just nice to grab. Another thing I use a lot of is Distress ink, and I'm just grabbing my pad and my, everyone has the standard distress dauber. These are Tim Holtz. You can get the square ones. That is a standard one. I've made my own from doorknobs as well. For traveling, let's grab my little one. So I have a little tiny one that I've made out of a little doorknob, and I've just put the eye and tooth stuff on there, and it just grabs. So this one I keep in my little carry-all when I'm traveling. I have a little tiny one, and it works really well, and I just throw a couple of extra sponges in, and that as well. And then a set, these are called blending brushes, and you can get these are actually makeup brushes, and you can get them online. Very dusty too, because I leave them in my tin. But I use the blending brush for doing the edges when you want a softer blend. For stenciling, these are perfect for stenciling when you're stenciling on your papers. And there's many different sizes. You can get this set, I think, for $9 online at Amazon. But I do use my blending brushes a lot. As you can see, this one is my favorite one, and it is pretty brown. But a blending brush of some kind, you can use makeup brushes, blush brushes, something like that, but it'll give you that nice soft for the stencils when you're using your Distress ink. So again, something I reach for almost in every project is my distressors. So Distress ink and some kind of a dauber and my blending brush. These all I keep together in my drawer. But that's another thing that I go for almost every day when I'm working on a project. I like to distress, so those are another thing that I use every single day. And you can go online and just put in blending brushes, and you will, sets will come up, gazillions of them will come up, and they're not expensive, they're just plastic. But I've had these ones again for a year and a half and use them often. I think that's it for now. I keep going on my project, and if something pops into my head, I will add on to the video. I wanted to share a couple of the paper punches that I use a lot. I do have a tab punch, and whenever I get scrap pieces, this is another thing that I do when I get my scrap bin full. I will go into my scrap bin and I will start making some tabs. And if you fold the paper over and have the fold at the top of this tab, make sure that it's not underneath, and you cut it, you will get a tab that flips open. I do have some tabs here. And then all I do is throw them into a bin. These are all single tabs. But if you want that fold, you have to put the fold so that it does not go underneath that top. You can actually see a little gap there, and you punch it and it will come out as a folded tab. Again, and I just go through all my scraps, my scrap bin once in a while, and anything that's small enough, I just punch tabs out of that scrap material. Sometimes you get really fancy end papers in some of your books. I save that. It's nice and thick, and I'll use that for cutting tabs. But this is one of my go-to punches. I use this a lot. I have not been able to find the whale tab, which is kind of that shape. If I ever come across one, I would probably get it as well. But this one does really well, and I like the shape of the tab, so I use that quite a bit in my projects. But a tab punch is always nice to have. I do have a couple of tag punches. I also have a punch that does the tops of your tags. That is great for making your own tags, having a tag punch. Again, I have about 2 or 3 of those, and I'll pull them out, but I use the tab punch and my tag punches a lot when I go to my scrap bin. Again, it's the perfect thing to do, sit in an evening and go through all your scraps. I have my 1-inch hole punch, round punch, and I use this a lot for making the little curves in your books. Let's grab a scrap piece of paper here. It has little lines on the side, and it is perfect for making those thumb punches. So my 1-inch circle punch, again, I use a lot. I do use my corner punch. I have quite a few different corner punches. Some work better than others. I find the corner rounder on my envelope punch board works really, really well. I use that a lot when it's out on my surface, but I usually just grab something that's in my bin. But a corner rounder, again, I like round edges more so than square edges. And a lot of the times I will hold my punches upside down so that I can see where I'm punching and I don't get a funny punch. That's just my preference, to hold them up the other way around. So same with this. When I'm cutting, I just like to be able to see what I'm punching. Flies at you. Another thing that I have is a reinforcement hole punch. I know people will just punch out the circles and then get a little hole punch and punch the centers. That's a lot of work. This one I use quite a bit, again, for when I have an old tea stain book, a vintage book, and the book pages have the header that is blank. I keep those because they're nice and aged, and I will punch reinforcement holes out. Oops, and these are all from some of those vintage papers. I just will sit, and if I have time or I'm bored and I'm watching TV, I will just get those vintage pages and I will just punch with my reinforcement hole, and I just go crazy and just punch away. And these are really nice for when you make your own tags and you want to have that nice little circle around the top of the tag hole. So again, I just save all those little scraps in a scrap bin, and will use them for my tabs. There's some little hearts as well, but that is something that I use a lot of. Now, the only thing I don't like about this punch is that you can't see the bottom. With these, you can see, oh, you have to remove that. You can see the bottom punch. This you cannot. That is literally where you're going. So you have to kind of guesstimate as to where you put that hole. And I just eyeball it a lot of the time, and we'll go across and punch. No, that's a pretty heavy piece, but, and then again, I just line it up and punch. Because you can't, if I put it right in, oops, right into the punch, see how far back it punches? It leaves a big gap there. So I just have to kind of guesstimate as to when I'm putting in. But I use this one a lot as well. So that is another tool that I, oops, need my lid, use a lot. My tag punches I use quite a bit as well. It's so much easier making tags with scraps than going out and buying a whole bunch. This size makes a 2 11/16 tag. And I have used those tags. Let me just grab my book here. This is the size tag that you get with this punch. So it's a nice size tag with that one. And they're fairly easy to use. And again, I flip them over upside down so that I can see that it goes in straight, and then just punch. And you get a nice size tag, and then you can punch your own hole as well. So I use that one quite a bit. Again, go through your scrap bin one day and just sit there and punch tabs. Any larger scraps I will punch tags out of, and then as I get smaller and smaller, when I have little bits and pieces, I would maybe use that for cutting out a few tabs. Now this is really thick cardstock, but that's how I would just sit one day and go through all of my scraps and make tags and tabs. This is a smaller version. It's sticky. And again, I like to flip them upside down so I can see where they're going in. So you can get a really, really thin piece, and as long as you make it fit within those perimeters, you can get a nice size tag. So there's that one as well. These are from the Recollections series. I just save up and use a 50% off coupon when I go to Michael's. This one I ordered online. It's Just My Craft, and I know there's a couple of different brands. And this one you can make a 1.5 inch tag, a 2 inch, and a 2.5 inch tag. So this is a 2 inch, and you just slide it into the grooves of the punch and punch it, and you get that little tag. Oh, it must have been a little bit wider than the 2 inches. It was. Barely, but it was. And you want to make sure it's in nice and straight. There, you get that nice. And this shape I use a lot. This 2 inch size is one that I use quite a bit. They have the 1.5 inch. I'm just going to slide that into the groove and push it right down at the end. And that just gives you a simple little. So this one looks almost like a little ticket. And then I would just get my corner rounder and round out the corners. And you'd have a nice little tag. So that's the one, the 2.5 inch. I don't think I have a piece wide enough for that one. It makes a funnier tag. I don't use that one as much. The 2.5 inch. Let me just grab a piece of cardstock here. The 2.5 inch punch. They also have one that makes the, what I call the angled corners. There's another one that's not rounded like this, and you can use that one as well. And then there's the other tag you can use, and it gives you more of a whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop-de one. So then I would take my little reinforcement holes that I punched out of scrap paper. Don't need the hole in there. And I would just glue that on right there, and then you have that look of a tag. As well. So those are some of the go-to punches I use a lot. And to maintain your punches, you can punch wax paper to wax up the edges of your punch, and you can also punch tin foil, is what I heard. Put tin foil in there and punch tin foil a couple of times, and it will sharpen the edges as well. I try and maintain my punches as much as possible. When they have lots of little springs and stuff in there, you want to be sure to make sure that they're oiled and whatnot, but you have to be very careful. If you put any kind of oil in these punches, they stay in there for a long time, and your punches will get sticky and leave a residue on anything that you punch. So be very careful with that. I sometimes just use one of those little tiny birthday candles and kind of rub around the edges and put some wax in there. But those are the punches that I use the most often. These little ones are perfect for little mini tags, and I just cut them out of white cardstock or ivory cardstock, file folders, and then you can punch your own little holes in there as well. So that's another thing that I use quite a bit in my tools. So another one of the tools that I use almost every day is a scoreboard. This one is pretty old. I think I've had it for quite a few years, and I use this pretty much every day when I'm crafting. It does come with a scoring tool, but it's starting to wear away at the ends. I do use it when I'm in a hurry, but I also have a stylus that I use for scoring. I just find this works a lot better, and this is a double-ended, a little thicker one and a smaller one. So I do use my scoreboard quite a bit. This is an EK Tools. I've had this one for a while, and I bought it online, and it does have the optional tool here, and I believe that's for making diagonal corners as well. I think you just kind of stick it up in the corner there, and then you can make diagonal lines as well. But I do use my scoreboard a lot. It's a necessary tool. I was even thinking of getting another one. This one's getting pretty worn out, but it still does the trick. And the other, I have a couple of punch boards, but I find this envelope punch board, if you want to make your own envelopes, it comes with all the different sizes of paper you need, and you can create your own envelopes. So if you really want to really quickly make some envelopes out of scrap, or you make a card and you want to make an envelope that it'll fit, a punch board is awesome. It does have the corner punch, the corner rounder, which I use a lot. I like the size of the rounding of the corners for this specific punch, and it does have the little divot that it makes. Let me just grab a piece of cardstock here. It does have the little divot that you can use when you're creating some of your pockets. You can use that instead of the 1-inch circle. You can use this as your thumb punch as well. And you can also use this tool to make tabs on the tops of your, you would just cut that off and that piece off, and you make your own tab. You can make them as long as you want them, as wide as you want them. So there's a longer tab, and again, you would just put it in your cutter and you cut off that end, and you'd have a tab. So I do use my punch board quite a bit. So if that's something you wanted to invest in, you can use it as a punch, and you can also use it as a envelope maker in your scoreboard. Now I do talk quite a bit about my Lazy Susan, so I'm just going to pull it over and show you. This sits on top of my work surface, and you might get a few things poking up in the camera there. This is it's a Lazy Susan that you get for putting on your table. But I also have this Lazy Susan. It's a utensil holder, and it sits on the Lazy Susan, and then I just have things that I need to grab. This is where all my glue sits and my glue sticks. And that kind of thing that I need to get at right away. So this is all the stuff that stays on my table all the time. So there are my cuttings. See, they're quite gooey, so I have to clean these off. I have a couple of bone folders. If you're punching holes, and I know a lot of people ask about eyelets and punches. I use a lot of eyelets in my work. And you can buy a set of eyelets. Let me just move this out of the way here. You can buy a set of eyelets at Walmart, and it comes in a little pack. I'm just going to grab one. Eyelets are here. It comes in a little container like this, and it's in the sewing section at Walmart. And it comes with a variety of different colors, gold and black and silver, I believe. And there's about 40 in there. And it comes with this little tiny punch. It comes in the container. So you do not have to go out and buy a Big Shot eyelet punch, the handheld one, or the Big Shot, the bigger one that you have. You do not need to go and buy those. You simply just need a hole punch, which I will show you the one that I use, one that I take with me, and this, and a little hammer. And I find this little punch works fabulous if you are putting an eyelet in, say, a piece of cardstock or paper, and you find that the eyelet sits up too high because it's a taller shaft, using this little punch with a hammer will flatten it. And you don't need to hammer like crazy. You just give it a whack on a hard surface. I take it out to my garage and we have a vise there, and I just set my journal on the vise, grab my hammer and go whack, and it flattens it perfectly. So really, if you're going to buy some eyelets, as long as you have a hammer, you have the punch already, you're good to go. Now, for punching holes, you can use a regular eyelet, a hole punch. Now this one's a larger one, so when I put an eyelet in, it's a little bit too big, but you can buy different size hole punches. Buy a simple little hole punch. I have this one. You can buy it in the stuff falling out of it, leather section at the store. I get this one at, I think I got this one at Michael's, and it's in with the leather. So this is for punching holes in leather, and it comes with quite a few different little heads. And you just put them in there. You choose, that's the largest hole. That's the one I use for my eyelets. And you just screw it on. And you literally, let me just grab my little scrap piece of, mat cutter here. And you literally just push down on it and it rotates. And it will cut a hole for you in your paper. It just twists. And it's the perfect, this is the one I take with me when I travel. I don't take you don't have to take your big hand punches and stuff. You literally take that, and I have this tiny little hammer that I got in a jewelry making kit, and that's what I take with me. And it is so easy. You can punch a hole anywhere in your journal, on the spine, in the middle of your journal with this. Put the eyelet in, and you just need your hammer and your little punch that comes with the eyelets, and that's all you'd need. So you don't need to go out and buy all the hand punches and the big ones and all that. This comes with, I think, 5 different heads that you can put in here, so you can use it for the smaller holes as well. And this is probably the one that I grabbed the most because it's in my Lazy Susan and it's on my desktop, and I can punch a hole fairly quickly through anything and in any location of my journal, and then I don't have to run around and grab my big shot and stuff like that. So if you're just starting out, you know, invest in the hand punch that twists. You push down and the head twists, and it comes with 5 different little shafts here. This comes with the eyelets if you purchase them at Walmart. Just buy them once, get 1 shaft. Every time I buy them, I must have about 12 of these little little punches. But it's simple enough. It's easy enough, and it works for any location you want to put that eyelet, rather than having to have, you know, the big handheld or the big desktop one that you have to really punch. So to me, a little tiny hammer and this, it works perfectly for working with eyelets. So that's an easy investment instead of buying some of the bigger tools. If you use Fabri-Tac or the 3-in-1 glue, if you're using this with the paper, and I still use this when I'm in a hurry, or I use my art glitter glue as well. But if you're using this, and if I was to glue something on here and some of the shiny glue oozed out the side, try not to wipe it away. Just let it dry. Grab yourself a gum eraser. I got this at the dollar store, and it's hard. It's just rubber. And you just rub that where the glue is, and it literally pulls the glue off. It takes away that shiny bit of glue that is left on your paper. So if you're going to use Fabri-Tac or any of this type of glue, grab yourself a gum eraser. You will be so happy that you did, and it cost me $1. But that's another thing, and again, that sits on my Lazy Susan. So if I'm using my Fabri-Tac and something oozes out, I let it dry, and then I just rub it with that gum eraser, and it literally just kind of rubs it off. It's the perfect tool to have if you're going to use the Fabri-Tac glue. There's a couple more things. I do use a die cutting machine, not very often. If I want to cut out shapes, I'm going to sit there for a day and just grab some scraps and cut out some shapes. I do use my die cut Big Shot for cutting out some of the oval shapes and labels and stuff like that. I do use that, but not very often. I'll just use it maybe once or twice a month, and I'll sit there and cut out a whole bunch of things, and then I just throw them in a box. So you don't need to go out and buy a die cutting machine if that's all you're going to use it for. I do have the little sidekick one, and I've used that for making like little tickets and stuff like that. But again, it's something that I don't use every day. It's just a once a month type thing. I do have a sticker making machine, and I do use those a lot. Let me just grab them and I'll show you. So this one's a creative sticker, and it can take something up to 5 inches. And then this is just a little tiny 1-inch one. And I use this when I make my little postage stamps. I have a punch that makes a postage stamps. I call them itty bitties. And I will, if I find little tiny pictures of things, I will put it through this and make them into little stickers. And you just pull it and rip it off so you can make yourself a little sticker. And I don't use this all the time, but I find it's one of those things that you could sit down if you're cutting up, doing some fussy cutting, and you find some little tiny flowers and you don't really know, you don't want to cut around every single little one. You can just cut a little circle or punch a little square and then make it into a sticker. So I do use this. I absolutely love my sticker machine. I've used it for the Reader's Digest end papers to make some labels. And I've also stamped some labels with some of my stamps. And I've used my sticker machine to create these into labels. So these are the Ex Libra from all my Reader's Digest books that I've shown you in another video. They were the end papers, and this was in the front of the Reader's Digest book. So I just cut them all out on my cutter and then put them through my sticker machine, and they are now labels. And I have quite a few of them, because I have tons of Reader's Digest books. And then some of the bigger ones, as I got into the older books, I've just used those. So it's a nice way to use up some of this stuff that you have. I stamp my own labels with a label stamp that I have on tea stain paper or lined paper, and then I put them through the sticker machine. So that is one of my favorite tools. I wait until I get an Amazon card from my daughter for Christmas or something like that, and then I'll actually purchase a couple of the cartridges that go inside the sticker machine, and then I'll just buy 1 or 2 of them and have them on hand, and then I'll just spend a day. So this is something I might use once a month. I'll just start stamping and making a whole bunch of stamps and then put them through the sticker machine and cut them all up. So that's another thing that I use. It's my favorite, but I don't use it every single day. So put that back on my shelf. And as I keep working on my little booklets here, if I come across something else, I'll add it to this video as well. So I have pretty much finished up with my favorite tools that I can think of anyway, off the cuff. I did want to share, I've had this roll for quite a long time, and this is what I use to sew my pages into my journals. This is a waxed thread that I bought on Amazon. It was a lot larger roll, and I believe it comes in other colors, but I just took this beige colored one. It's waxed. I don't think it's cotton, but it is really sturdy, and it's not sticky waxed. I know some of the waxed threads that you get are very sticky and they leave a residue on your paper. This is waxed, but it's not sticky at all. But it's nice that you can flatten it and get your needle in there, and you can just feel a little bit of the wax on there. But I've used this for almost all of my journals. I use it when I sew all my little journals as well. But this is something that I ordered online and just absolutely love it. It's nice and sturdy, and it's thin enough that you can use it for even the smallest journals. Now sometimes I will use embroidery floss for some of the smaller journals just to give them some color, but 99% of the time I use this wax thread. And again, I've had this probably 2 years, so I still have quite a bit left, but I did order myself 2 rolls. I do use needles with the larger heads on them, and I do keep a short one and a long one. I keep this little needles handy, so that's another one of my favorite little tools, using that. And again, my awl for punching. This was the green woolly spongy thing that I was talking about to clean my scissors. I do keep the 2 pairs of scissors I explained before. My paper scissors, and then this one I will use if I'm cutting something sticky like washi tape or a piece of paper that I've glued. And I just went ahead and cleaned these yesterday, and all I do is wet my green, I guess it's like a sponging pad for the kitchen, and I will scrape off all the glue and muck from my scissors, and then I will sharpen them. And then these are what I call my glue scissors. So I have two different color scissors, and I try and make sure that I do not mix the two up. But this little spongy thing is great. I know a lot of people have dangles for their glitter glue, and they use a little wire peg and they put it inside. Now, if you read the instructions when you buy one of these, it comes with a pin with a ball on the top, and you're supposed to put that in there. You're not supposed to store it all the time in there, I don't believe. I think you're supposed to take it off, and there comes another cap. There's another cap that you put back on it when you're storing it. When you're using it all the time, I think the pin is just there to keep it from getting jammed, but you're not supposed to store it that way for a long time. Now, I just have used this ball pin. It's got like a little loop on the top, and you can see it was obviously a silver plated, because the coloring is gone on the shaft of it. Now, the thing I've learned is that when you're putting this in and out and using the glue, this will start to get sticky. If you keep one of these handy and a little bit of water, you can scrape the glue off in about 3 seconds. Just give your wire a quick scrape, and then it'll slide back in there. And I find if I do that, it doesn't get rusty. I know that if you leave this in here a long time and you go to ooze out your glue comes out a little brown because there's a little bit of rust in there. As long as I keep this clean, when I'm using the glue off and on, and I notice that it starts to get a buildup, or when you go to put the wire back in and it starts to get stuck, I just clean it with this, pop it back in there, and it's perfect. And I have not had any rust in my glue, and even though it's changed colors, it's perfect. So there's a little tip for you if you use danglies. This did have a dangly on it, and I pulled it off and I just set it aside. I did not put it back on again, but I am going to make another dangly for this glue. Something a little simpler that won't get in my way when I'm using it quite a bit. But getting these, and I think these are just at the dollar store, and they come in larger sizes, and I just cut them up. I would probably even cut this into a smaller size so that I can store it in my Lazy Susan. And it's great for cleaning the scissors and these little nibs on the top of your glue. Anyway, I think I'm going to stop there. I think my video is getting pretty long of my favorite tools. If I think of anything else when I do another video, I will mention another tool that I use quite often. But I think basically those are the tools. I mean, I use rubber stamps and all kinds of other things, but I was trying to explain more tool-wise what I use a lot of. So I think that's it for now. So thank you very much for watching. Sorry it was such a long video. I hope you're being creative and enjoying your stay at home and your social distancing. Stay healthy, stay creative, and we'll see you real soon. Bye now.